Thank you very much. Almost 3 years ago, we were named the #1 small business in the entire state of North Carolina. Now, it wasn't the #1 dealership, #1 used car store, #1 new car store, the #1 small business, and we were overwhelmed. A couple weeks later, I got a call from the producer of the Brian Tracy show. Now, Brian Tracy's always been a mentor of mine, and most of you probably know at least who Brian Tracy is if you haven't read several of his books or watched his, listened to his audio programs over the years. And he actually wanted me to be a guest on his show to tell my story, my family story, my dealership story. Of course, I said what most of you said, and I said, yes, when can I be there? So I went to be on the Brian Tracy show, got finished with the segment, and afterwards the producer came up to me and he said, you've got a great story. I'd love to turn your story into a movie. And once again, I said what most of you would have said. Yeah, right. Handed him a card, we exchanged cards. I went back to North Carolina expecting nothing. A few months later, the producer called back and said, no, I'm serious. I really think that your family story, your dealership story, and your story as an entrepreneur would make a fantastic movie. So after many, many months of us discussing back and forth and making sure their vision for our store was the same as our vision for our store and making sure they lined up, they decided we were going to make this happen. Well, the movie came out. It was named Carmen. We're very fortunate that it turned out the way it did. The reel that you just saw, very small portion of that film, it won 5 Telly Awards, and next week we'll find out if it's actually up for Emmy nominations. It was on the Biography Channel nationwide, and I tell you all that not because I want a soapbox and want to brag about our store, which if you're not going to brag about your store, who is, right? So very happy about what we've done and about the movie. Fact that it was made. But more than anything, I love this industry and I'm passionate about this industry, as I'm sure that each and every one of you are as well. That's one of the reasons you're here. You're passionate about what we do, you're passionate to learn, and I was really passionate about this movie coming out and letting everyone see this film and showing them what automotive industry professionals are really like. Wouldn't you agree? Some of the finest people I know are in this industry, and unfortunately we've been backed into what I call a negative corner, into a bad place. A lot of times we have really bad, there are really bad stereotypes, wouldn't you say, about automotive dealers? And this movie, if anything, if they blurred my face out, that would be okay in this film, because it really is about the success of our industry as a whole. And the movie itself, it's been a platform for me. The story of my family, it's been a platform for me to share. And as I went around the country over the past year, and I've shared my story, my family story, the story about the dealership, and promoting the movie, not one time that I've spoken, one person, has it ever passed, one person would come up to me and say, it is awesome that you have achieved the American dream. Your family has achieved the American dream. I said, you're missing the whole point. Respectfully, it's not about reaching the American dream. It's about the journey towards the American dream. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share with you my family's journey towards the American dream. And like all stories, we got to go all the way back to the beginning, because we fast forwarded to the end. So we're going to have a really good time, or I'm going to have a really good time. I hope you do. This 6 o'clock gig is a little tough. Everybody's tired, need to stretch it out, right? You need some coffee, you need dinner, you need the reception hall. Whatever the case may be, I can assure you of a couple things. Everything that I'm going to share with you today there's going to be something that each and every one of you can take back to your stores and implement. And number 2, I'm not going to try to sell you anything, because frankly, I don't have anything to sell you. Fair enough? Awesome. The story all starts in Germany, of all places. My ancestors were from Germany. 2 brothers came to America on a boat with 2 hammers and opened a successful construction business. And without getting too political, they built it all by themselves. Then there was my great-grandfather. Now, my great-grandfather opened the very first Frank Myers store more than 85 years ago. And he was in a very small town They had 4 general stores in their town, and that's the way this store started. General store, they sold candy, meat, cheese, flour, gas, as you can see from the picture. That's actually the only picture we've got of him in front of the store. I really wish I had that car and that gas pump. And I wished I could have gotten to know my great-grandfather. Because everything I've heard about him, most of it's in the book Uncle Frank Says. Most of the quotes in that book and the sayings, they come from my great-grandfather. Of course, my father also picked those up as well and turned them into what my father will turn things into, and that's the word according to Uncle Frank. But he operated this general store successfully in this small town for more than 50 years. There were 3 other stores in that town just like his. They sold the same products to the same people, essentially. Obviously, back then there wasn't a stoplight. They got their products from the same truck. Same delivery truck drove from store to store to store to store, and they had the same product. The funny thing about it is, as our family of entrepreneurs went through the generations, we always asked ourselves, so how did he stay successful in that small town for all those years when the other general stores closed and opened and closed and opened and had different owners and they never really could stay afloat? And the more we thought about it, the more it actually puzzled us. Because I want you to think about it for a minute. They had the same products. Does that sound familiar? As automotive dealers, don't we have the same products essentially as our competitors? Now, I'm in a little bit different situation because I'm an independent dealer, but I'm not kidding myself. We buy the same cars at the same places that our competitors buy from as well. And where's that? The auction. I'm in the auction in the lane with my fellow dealers that are right next door, and we're buying the same fleet cars that they're buying. And we have to pay the same thing for them because guess what? We're buying them at the same place. That's what the marketplace is dictating. Transportation back to the dealership is what? The same thing. Reconditioning within reason is what? Same thing. And the marketplace will only allow us to charge a certain price, give or take. Agree? So how do you get ahead in the marketplace? How did he get ahead in the marketplace? Is it easier now or harder now? More difficult or is it easier? I guess it depends on who you ask. If you're successful in your marketplace, probably you'd say it was easier, right? But I often wonder, and unfortunately, all we can do is assume. Because he stayed successful in this town until he actually retired and was always profitable. They sold the same products, the same products for the same price, bought them from the same place. But the one thing that we did find out from journals and diaries and his book of credit, of course, I've never heard of anything like this. This may be a small southern town type thing. But there was podiums in the general store, and they were slanted, kind of like this one, and there were big books, and they were credit ledgers. So if Troy came into the store, and he said, "Hey, Frank, I'd like some flour. I'd like some bread. I'd like some milk. I'd like some cheese. And by the way, I'm getting some gas in my car." Great. What did he do? He wrote it down in the credit book. Now, we know for a fact, because we found relatives of the other people that owned stores in the town, that they didn't do that. But we also found out through lots of interviews that he knew the name of almost everybody in town. So one of the themes that I've heard lots of speakers talk about here at the AutoCon conference is people. It's amazing that that one thing never changes. It's still about people today, right? Now, through all of our interviews and everything that we found, we got a real good assumption that my great-grandfather knew something that the others didn't. Or maybe they knew it and just didn't put it into action, because you can know something, not put it into action, and it's useless, right? And he knew that people bought from people. The product didn't matter. And if you don't take anything away from this today, as I'd like to share with you, that it's still about the people. The product is essentially the same everywhere you go. But it's always about the people. I'm under the theory, it's a pretty good theory because we're very successful, that you can charge more for your product. I said more for your product if your people are good and your processes are good and they like you, know you, and trust you. Anyone heard that before? Not the charging more part, but they got to like you, know you, and trust you. I think the first sales conference I ever went to, ever, when I was 18, 19 years old, the guy said, they got to like you, know you, and trust you. Just like that. And they're still saying that today, they being the sales gurus. And they are so right. Building rapport and them liking you, knowing you, and trusting you is as important today as it ever was. But it is an amazing story that all those many years ago is that he could build relationships with the people in the town where if a little kid walked in